Hello everyone, welcome back to Too Sweet MTG and welcome to another Cube Tuesdays. In today's episode, we're going to be going over a bunch of the recent changes that I've made to my cube. So yeah, the last time I made a video, we were kind of around this area. We'd cut Aristocrats, we'd cut Delirium, we'd cut Persist combos because they wasn't really working, we brought in double fetches, we brought in like a Golgari land, Sack Matters, Death and Taxes, Selesnya Hate Bears, and like a Rakdos Aristocrats. So, a couple of bits on that. Double fetches has worked pretty well, I've kind of enjoyed that. Death and Taxes has been solid, and I've personally quite enjoyed Selesnya Hate Bears. We haven't really missed the Persist combos, and we haven't really missed Mardu Aristocrats, if I'm honest. So since this change, I've been a bit busy. I've made 2 big updates, and then some new tests here. So 3 main changes to the cube since then. So what have I done? Why have I done this? With removing Mardu Aristocrats, there was just some cards I missed, firstly, which kind of freed up my black section. So cards like Bloodghast, Gutterbones, Graveclaw, like the recursive black 1-drops that are pretty solid aggressive creatures, they really live in the Aristocrats decks. Like, when you take those out, they have less of a place. So that really did free up my black section to try new things, which we'll get onto in a moment. You can also see here that very briefly, I tried an attractions board. Spoiler, it was not very good, so it got immediately cut. And also, there was a lot of faffing around from my end with the Madness package. I was trying out all these different Madness creatures. Didn't really come together, but I think Madness is in a good spot now. But we'll go over to the list and I'll go through some of the most recent changes and what I've done. So don't worry, this will make sense in a moment. I've kind of tagged the new archetypes in colours and we'll go through them one by one in a sec. But I think the most obvious place to start is just tests from the most recent set, which is March of the Machines. So we're running Fairy Mastermind, this has been pretty solid. Rona, Herald of Invasion, I've liked. Chromo Seed Shark is probably my favourite card from the set. I think this one will end up doing the most of all the cards in here. Bloodfeather Phoenix is a very good aggressive creature, as is Rampaging Raptor. We're perfectly happy testing these out. Renin Realmbreaker has been solid, not fantastic, but I think we need to give it time to kind of let it find its proper place. Same with Thalia and the Gitrog monster. I think it just needs a bit of time to be picked in the right deck rather than being picked early because it's a new shiny card. So these are the 7 cards that we're running from March of the Machines. In terms of Aftermath, I would probably consider running the new Nissa if it wasn't stupidly expensive at time of recording. Hopefully it goes down in price and we can test it out. It's basically a semi-worse version of Lotus Cobra with maybe some combo potential upside, maybe some value upside. But I'm not spending 40 quid on one because that seems rather stupid. If it comes down in price, then maybe we'll give it a test. Right, so let's reset these filters and we'll go over the list in general. So probably the biggest changes to the cube has been the emergence of a red back kind of Aristoscraps artifact kind of section. So I'll go through that first. I started making this change in the last update, but I think now it's actually in a very good spot. Like, someone actually took down a cube win with this deck. There were a few cards added to power it up, which I'll definitely explain a bit more now. Right, so on screen here is all the cards that I've pretty much added to support this archetype. You can see it's quite a lot. But by cutting Aristocrats from Mardu, I had a lot of space. Stuff like Goblin Welder and Duretti and Chaos Defiler were kind of already in, but we've definitely added to that to make it a whole fleshed out section. Basically, the idea of this is you are playing a load more artifact that kind of synergize together to give you a load of additional value. So you have cards like Disciple of the Vault, Psychomancer, and Oniko Anvil that ping your opponents when your artifacts are going to the graveyard. We have things like Blood Fountain, Experimental Synthesizer, Pyrite Spellbomb, on top of the stuff I was already running, like both like Urza's Bauble and Mishra's Bauble, that are basically artifacts that want to go to the graveyard. They're also nice and cheap, so they work with something like Goblin Welder. The idea is you can put something big and dumb into the bin, something like a Portal to Phyrexia, play one of these cheap, dirty artifacts, and then sacrifice the small one, get the big one into play, and you can kill them with that. But there's just been so many good artifact creatures printed recently, like we have things like Blade of the Oni, Razorlash Transmogrant. Triarch Praetorian is a really solid little card, and then Scorpeth Lord, which gives all artifact creatures +1/+0 and Menace, is just really, really scary. Like, this is a fantastic Lord, and it also has Unearth. Like, that was a big thing for me. Like, a load of the artifact creatures from the Warhammer set have things like Unearth, so they already have some play going into the graveyard. I think that's quite cool. When you combine that with cards like Phyrexian Dragon Engine, you just have this kind of dearth of just really solid, aggressive artifact creatures that kind of work with each other to buff themselves up and are just really, really scary and synergize with each other. Some of the changes I made just to kind of give this deck a bit more reach is I did cut some more like generic-y mono-red aggro creatures for stuff like Reinforced Ronin and Lizard Blades. Like, both these are very solid cards that go in the mono-red aggro deck anyway, but because they're both artifacts, they have play in this deck as well. That's kind of one of the concessions that I had to make. I did also add Mishra's Workshop to my cube. Don't worry, I did not spend the how many thousands of pounds this is. Mine is very much a proxy, but you'll see this in some of the other upgrades that I made to the cube. Basically, I added the most broken card I could think of to power up some of the more synergistic archetypes that definitely needed a bit of a leg up, and also to incentivize people to draft them. Basically, my hope by adding just these big, dumb, powerful cards to the cube is that someone sees a Mishra's Workshop and is like, oh, that's a powerful card. How can I build around this? Or if something like the Workshop is opened later on in a draft, it rewards the player who is already in the artifacts for taking the artifacts early because they're the only one there who wants the Workshop. Basically, I'm trying to reward players who've gone for synergy over just raw power level. So all of these artifact good stuff has come in, along with our mono brown section. So remember, all of these cards can go into the last deck that we mentioned. In fact, some of them are red. But we have things like Stone Cold Serpent and Hangback Walker were already in, but we've added cards like Gingerbrute, Arcbound Ravager, a nice little artifact sacrifice thing that can also just get really big and scary by itself. We have Patchwork Automaton, we have Phyrexian Revoker, we have Porcelain Legionnaire that was already in. A new addition was something like Steel Overseer. This really rewards you for running a lot of artifact creatures. We have an Etched Champion, again rewarding you for having a large amount of artifacts, just being a very solid creature if you can get that Metalcraft turned on. Metalworker was already in, but Lodestone Golem I think is very cool for this kind of deck. It's just rewarding you for running a lot of artifact creatures and doesn't ask that much. It's just a 4-mana creature that can basically tax your opponent and not you. We really like it. And then obviously Nettlesys coming in, going in kind of all the artifact decks, just getting bigger for the number of artifacts that you control. So the goal of this was for the red-black version to be more kind of value from artifacts dying, but they're also existing kind of a more colorless based one that is way more aggressive. So you're playing things like Gingerbrute or Ice-Eyed Golems on turn 1, then turn 2 you're slamming down a Steel Overseer and just buffing up your board. But then almost that seems really cool and very, very scary. And yeah, the red-black version of this deck won my last cube, and it was a very, very scary deck. It was both an aggressive deck and a combo deck, which is very hard to actually deal with. The player had the Workshop and was just turn 1ing Phyrexian Dragon engines. That's very, very scary. The deck also had things like Goblin Welder and Portal to Phyrexia. So when it came up against kind of more mid-rangey control matchups, it could just combo out something huge and win the game that way. This is probably one of the biggest changes I've been making to my cube recently, and I'm very glad that it firstly won a cube showing that the deck is good enough, because it is kind of a cool synergistic thing, and it's something interesting to do with black. The black artifact cards like Scorpeth Lord and Necron Deathmark and Phyrexian Fleshgorger, I think are really cool, and black's certainly been missing that, so I'm really happy that this has worked. Let's quickly go over the other artifact deck, which is kind of a blue X artifacts deck. So we've already have things like Hard Evidence. I like this card way too much. But the Chrome Host Seachark has come in, Aether Spellbomb has come in, Treasure Vault also has come in as a way of making artifacts. So kind of the idea with the blue X version is you're kind of going wide with your artifacts. So you're running things like Urza Lord High Artificer combined with Third Path Iconoclast, Saheeli Sublime Artificer that just spit out a load of tokens. So with the blue version, you're kind of going wide with the artifact tokens, and then you're making the construct tokens off of Urza Lord High Artificer, and you're beating down your opponent that way. So this is way more a go wide with artifact strategy, whereas the black-red version is more kind of sacrificing value from them going to the graveyard, and the mono-brown one is just more aggressive beatdown. But then the blue version obviously does also have Tinker into an Inkwell Leviathan. That is a very solid way of winning a game of Magic. So all this means that there are 3 distinct artifact decks in my cube, and I really think that generally there should be 2 players drafting artifacts in my cube now, in any 8-person pod. I'm kind of hoping because a player has won a cube with it now that people will kind of be more open to drafting it, but we'll kind of see how that goes and we'll keep an eye on that. The other change that I've made recently is with Madness, so let's have a look at that next. I've really been faffing around with this, and why I didn't make a video for the last update was because I really wasn't happy specifically with what I'd done to the Madness section. I was trying a load of multicolored Madness cards that only the Madness deck would want. I drafted it. It was just really bad. Even with double fetches, the mana was nowhere near good enough to go turn 2 Golgari, turn 3 Rakdos, and something like that. It was just not doable. So basically, my plan with Madness was to strip it down to the core elements. So basically, you could have a good green-red deck or a green-black deck with kind of a sprinkling of Madness on top to kind of give you that little bit of push to push you over the edge. So we still have the 2 Root Wallers, we have the Vengevines, we have the Fauna Shamans and the Survival of the Fittest, along with other discard outlets like Burning Inquiry, Faithless Looting, Wheel of Fortune, and I guess Magmatic Channeler is a nice looter as well. But I've kind of got rid of the cards like Noose Constrictor and Wild Mongol that were just kind of only in there for this deck and didn't do much for any other deck. Green 2s is very greedy for me to put cards just for one deck in there. But we still have some other discard outlets with things like Territorial Kavu, Underworld Cookbook, kind of Bone Shards, as well as madnessing in these creatures. We only actually have 3 Madness creatures in there now, but it's more like a graveyard value-y deck where you can do this kind of cool combo thing of getting your Vengevine out super early, that kind of thing. What I was saying earlier about putting in powerful cards to reward the player for kind of doing the thing and committing to it. That's why Hogak has come back in. This deck is very good at putting out tiny little creatures and stuff into the graveyard so you can play that Hogak again and again. The other card that I have put in, because I'm a bit of a fiend, is Bazaar of Baghdad. Again, this one is very much a proxy. Unfortunately, I do not own one. Even though Dredge is God's perfect mechanic, fight me. Basically, I know that Bazaar of Baghdad is exceptionally greedy. Like not many decks want it. We do have the Grave Show in here, so we can do some Dredge shenanigans with it. I'm just noticing that Stinkweed Imp should definitely be in this section. There we go, much better. Stinkweed Imp is where it belongs. So we do have 2 Dredges in here to kind of fuel the graveyard for the Hogak and do some cool Bazaar of Baghdad stuff. Because yeah, I think Bazaar falls into very, very broken card that won't just go into every deck. I'm kind of fine opening the cube up to that now. That's why we brought Workshop in as well. It's a card that if you get it in the right deck will be obscenely powerful, but not most players will want it. It's again rewarding players for trying to be super synergistic, which I kind of like that spot if I'm honest with you. The other big change I've made recently is to Gruul, and we're running this like kind of Gruul monsters thing basically. So these are the cards that I've added, so we've already had Minsc and Boo in. Domri, Arcanic of Bolas is a nice little addition to this. It can ramp up your monsters and also give them +1/+0. We like that. So we already have all of our mana dorks that are already in. So we have like the Llanowar Elves, we have the Birds of Paradises, we have the Hierarchs, they're already in. We're adding Biophagus on top of this to kind of make the creatures that we cast get that little bit bigger. Again, similar to Domri, to kind of just buff up our beef. But then we just have some undercosted beaters, like I really like Bloated Contaminator. I've been very impressed by this card. Same with Simian Simulacron. It's just a very big creature that you can get back from the graveyard and put the counters onto something else as well if you wanted to. Questing Beast was already in, because obviously it's just a very good card. And then we also have brought in Verdurous Gearhulk. Again, it just puts 8 power on the board for 5 mana. That's very, very good, like especially in green where you're ramping this stuff out. Then obviously in red we have Rampaging Raptor from the new set, and I'm trying out Goldspan Dragon. Basically I wanted a 5-mana dragon in there. This also makes artifacts, so it kind of made sense for me to try this out as it synergizes with some of the other stuff that the cube is trying to do. But basically, the reason for this deck coming in is myself and a lot of my player group are kind of similar on the opinion that mono green is just kind of dead. Like, yes, Elf into Natural Order into Hoof is very, very strong, but the games where that actually comes out is very, very small. You first need to draft that exact situation and then curve out in order and then have the Natural Order at the right point. This version of the deck, just by adding red, is asking you to just play good creatures and kill your opponent before they can deal with anything. Like, have you read Minsc and Boo? This is a messed up card. Effectively, you're just playing a deck that can get the most out of cards like Minsc and Boo, cards like Questing Beast, cards like Rampaging Raptor or Goldspan Dragon. You're just basically playing mana dorks, ramping out something big and hitting an opponent in the face. Like the vanilla test died and burned in 2020. We are now in a world where 3-mana 4/4s with Trample are the norm. Like this is honestly the best thing green can be doing in 2023, so we might as well lean into it. Cool, so I will put a full link to my cube down in the description below if anyone wants to check it out. You can also do a little playtest draft. Ooh, let's go, if you want to have a go drafting it yourself. But I'm actually very happy with where the cube is right now. Like, I feel every archetype has the chance to do what it's meant to do and be kind of strong. I'll definitely be tinkering with it. I always tinker with this kind of stuff. I like making changes because that's just kind of me. But I'm pretty sure I'm not going to make any kind of archetype changes for a fair little bit. The next round of changes will probably be after the Lord of the Rings set comes out, which I am super hyped about. That is going to be great. But I think we will leave it there. Until next time, please like, share, and subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know down in the comments what you think of my changes. What do you think is good that I've added? What don't you like? But anyway, until next time, I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.